Hello, hello. Welcome to the Be Yourself But Better podcast, where we love who we are, we accept who we are, we draw from our own experiences, but we also pursue relentless growth. This episode of the podcast with Izzie Miller is about moving from a place where mindset and processing emotions feels daunting and mysterious to a place where she artfully has mastered the skill and is now bringing it out to the world. She's an excellent communicator. She is highly intelligent. She holds public lectures and speeches and workshops in schools and universities all over Europe and hosts retreats where she helps people move out of their limiting mindsets or limiting beliefs and really embrace themselves and grow. Izzie has been a force to speak with. She has concrete advice, but she's also really honest and vulnerable and open in how she tells her story and helps us understand so much more about ourselves. I'm really excited for this one. Hope you enjoy it too. Let's get going. Thank you for making the time for us. We're really excited to learn about your story.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So tell us, I definitely have followed you on social media for some time, but I'm really eager to hear, how would you tell your story?
Gosh, where do you start to tell a story? Well, I grew up as the middle child in a family where my parents were not married for the right reasons. And that household, quite a few members of my family have something called Asperger's, which means that from an emotions perspective and an emotional intelligence perspective, they can find it quite tricky to control their emotions. This is specific to my family. Asperger shows up differently in different people, but what that meant and the reason for bringing it up is I grew up in a household with a bunch of people who weren't in control of their emotions, and I think subconsciously that led to a deep-rooted interest in psychology, in how different people respond to different things and respond to the same thing in different ways. And then through my own journey of maybe not responding to things in the best of ways, I realized that actually when we become aware of our thoughts and we implement a few different strategies or hacks, we can not only start to change our behavior, but when we change our behavior and change our thought patterns, we start to feel better a lot more of the time. We're more confident in who we are, not just in how we are. And overall, life looks shinier. We feel shinier and everything feels better. So I'm a natural sharer. I love sharing things that I see, things that I hear, things that have helped me. And so that sharing on social media led me to go down the route of doing this for a living, really. So now I share this stuff in schools, universities, workplaces, through talks, workshops, and I'm soon to be running a retreat. So yeah, it comes in all sorts of vehicles, but at the crux of it is helping people to feel better more of the time by becoming more conscious of their thoughts.
That's amazing. You mentioned Asperger's, and that actually got my attention because, I don't know if you've watched a series. There is a series called Parenthood. It used to air here in America few years ago. It's not recent anymore, but in Parenthood they featured a kid who has Asperger's, and that's my association of the understanding of Asperger's. And I think people who have Asperger's, one aspect is not being in control of their emotions, or being a little socially awkward even sometimes. But the other aspect that they've at least shown in that series is that they are extremely intelligent. Their IQs are through the roof.
Yes, my brother is incredibly successful and has done extremely well for himself. But the thing here is they are intelligent when they want to be. or at least that's how it showed up. So yeah, it's there's this sort of tendency to hyper focus on certain things, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that this hyper focus on something can end up being, you know, what leads them to develop this insane intelligence and do extremely well. So yeah, I'm in awe of them.
Yeah, yeah. And that's interesting, right? Because you know how they say all of your strengths are your weaknesses, and
Mm.
all of your weaknesses are also your strengths. So anytime you recognize something as a strength, I think it is opportunity for us to be aware of it. How is it not serving me well? Like, here is how it is serving me well, but I'm sure there are ways that it is not serving me well. I think this thinking has helped me a lot. Has this been your experience? Like, all of our strengths somehow translate to our weaknesses?
Absolutely. It's not something that's talked about all that much, you know, in this whole positivity industry, I guess you could call it. There's this idea of, okay, your weaknesses, look at them as your strengths, turn them that way. But sort of unconsciously, people imply to us that our strengths are also our weaknesses. So to put this into real life context, at the minute, I'm in a chapter of head down and build sort of this lifestyle and my ability to share what I do with more people and spread that. But the consequence of that, the consequence is having a really strong purpose, really strong passion, and an understanding as to like sort of what you're here to do. The downside of that is you're less sociable. you and so people will then say, oh, you're not spending, especially parents, they'll say, oh, you're not spending enough time with friends or relaxing, or you don't clean your house enough, you know. So yes, it's all this balance and working out, you know, do you want something to be your strength, even though it maybe has a weakness of you're not doing enough of this, or you're too focused,
Yeah.
or, you know, as you exactly that, whether it's in
I
our
think,
personality or
yeah. And I think, you know, even just the fact that we have the awareness helps. Like,
mm,
maybe we want to continue to be that way. Maybe we want to be so hyper focused that we don't care about cleaning the house because that's totally who I am.
mm,
um, but luckily, I married somebody who complements that, you know. So because I'm so
yeah,
aware of what are my uh, shortcomings, that I find ways to complement them from outside, like without focusing them, you know, without forcing change on myself. But it's interesting to know. So, growing up with people who have Asperger's around you and who are extremely intelligent, and I'm no by no ways doubting your level of IQ, but I mean, does that put a lot of pressure on the person who is more mature socially in some way, but also does it give less attention in some ways, and does that sort of affect how you your view of the world?
yeah, it's been something I've been thinking about lately, actually, how that's sort of impacted me. So my dad is somebody who I don't know if he'd admit it himself, but he is where the Asperger's sort of come from. And so I've never had an amazing relationship with him. My relationship was strongest with my mum, really, really close. But you're absolutely right. It's always the good kid, and I'm not hyping myself up as the good kid here, but
Yeah.
the less problematic child, or the child that gets on with things, that maybe is not always the center of that much focus, as you say. So yeah, my sister's too young, so she's not at the point of university, but my brother didn't go down that route. But yeah, I've definitely been sort of the odd one out in terms of children.
Yeah. And now in training people about how the thoughts that we have affect us,
Mm.
what are some of your like most basic guiding principle that, you know, like if you had to say all of the mindset things in like one or
Mm.
two sentences, what's the one core thing, you know, from a thought perspective that you believe if everybody was to focus on or become aware about, our lives would be somewhat better?
Yes. So I would say that the biggest thing that people don't necessarily understand, and if they did, would categorically change their lives and how they feel, is that a lot of people think things are black or white. They're either they've gone right or they've gone wrong, or maybe they're neutral. So maybe there's three there. But the thing is when something happens, there are an infinite amount of ways in which you can view that as a bad thing. You can argue till the cows come home as to why that went wrong. But there's also just as many ways that you can argue for it going right. And as I don't think it will come as a surprise, what we do as humans in this day and age is focus on how can we see it as a bad thing a lot of the time. And people will argue, no, but it is a bad thing because, I didn't want it to go that way. And so we're stuck in this. It's really difficult to shift yourself out of, oh, my boss just shouted at me. How can that be a good thing? Well, maybe your boss shouting at you has led you to the realization that you don't want to work in a place where the people above you shout and that's how they deal with things. And maybe that has led you down a path of finding a job that makes you so much happier. Yeah. You just have to allow your brain to open up, to almost look down a different fork in the road and think, okay, well, how could I see this as something that's actually a good thing? Not because you're in denial about it, not because, you're lying to yourself, just because you realize it's up to you. It's up to you. Lucky people aren't lucky. They just spin things in a way that makes it look like everything's worked out for them because they've decided that they're happy with how things have turned out. So when I learned this, people started calling me lucky. But no, I just decided I didn't want to look at something as bad because it doesn't serve me in any way. Why would I do that to myself?
Right. And I think, what you said is not to be in denial, right? Something bad happened. Yes, it was bad in ways, but that doesn't have to be just bad. So not black and white, like you said. Bad and also good at the same time.
Yeah, or we take away the words good and bad completely because it's a spectrum, right? And it's ultimately how you're perceiving things. And if you say something was bad, you're putting that label on it that can't really be taken away. It was a bad thing. It was a thing that happened that I wasn't expecting and I didn't want to happen like that. But again, it doesn't make it bad. Just because you weren't expecting it, just because society says a breakup is bad or someone cheating on you is bad, and I've experienced those things, doesn't mean you have to label it as that, because if you label it as that, you are out of control. You're no longer the person who's in the driver's seat, and our brains do not like being out of control.
Yeah. There's this one thing I've heard, Izzie, that when people want to make change, it happens in one of two ways. One, they're very conscious about it. They make small incremental progress every single day. Two, they have a large life event and overnight they decide this is not for me. I better, course correct or change something dramatically. And so growth happens in these two ways. What's your opinion of the matter?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've personally experienced both. I think the most change happens when you combine the two, right? So realizing that you need to, stop smoking, or realizing, having something happen that makes you realize you need to make a big change. Actually, one of the best ways to act on that realization is to start implementing these small things. But also implementing these small things is a way to make these changes proactively rather than waiting for that big life event to hit you in the face. But both will happen. Both are equally as important. But when you can combine the two, or at least just do these small things, because there's always ways that we can improve. So if we can dedicate 5 minutes every morning to just making those small changes, then we're going to get there before that life event hits us unexpectedly.
Yeah. But it's often very difficult to catch those things before life events actually force us to think that way. I know that there were some major life events that affected who I am today and how I view life and, how I think and all of those things, right? So would you want to be comfortable sharing some life events that you've seen with your clients, with yourself, that have actually helped push them out, so that somebody who's going through some life event today doesn't view it as something bad or label it as that, like you were saying, but is able to see how that can spur growth?
Well, I'll use myself as an example, because I think it's a common example. So a few years ago, on the day I came back from an anniversary trip with my partner, my ex-partner and the partner at the time, I discovered that he'd, for the entirety of our relationship, actually been cheating on me the whole time. And I thought I was going to marry this person, genuinely, maybe naively, but genuinely thought this was my person and this was going to happen. And especially when we just had a lovely trip away, to find this out, I had no idea how to handle the emotions. And for a long time, I saw myself as a victim. And it's, I was spiraling down and down. And to sort of cut that story sort of short, I would not be where I am today if that hadn't happened, 100%. Because getting myself into that hole where I felt like such a victim, that I was so emotional, I was fired from my job, my brand new job. I couldn't then afford my brand new flat, so I had to move back in with my family. I was so full up of emotion. And as somebody who stress eats, it was so strange, but I couldn't eat. And I started going to the gym so much that my health plummeted. I was no longer menstruating. Everything at a time in my life when it was supposed to all come together and flourish, it completely crumbled. But I always now can come back to that feeling of seeing myself as an absolute victim of something that society, yes, says you're a victim of. They cheated on you. They treated you unfairly. You were a victim. And if you've ever been in a relationship that you thought was the one and it crumbled, and, when you were least expecting it, you know what this feels like. But feeling that way and realizing in a bit of a click moment, I read a quote, and it wasn't a light bulb moment. It never really is. Sometimes we think that it is, but it never really is.
Yeah.
I realized, and this is where it all happened, I realized I was in control of the way that I thought, and maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a bad thing. And that thinking led me to where I am now. And I am so grateful that relationship, that he cheated on me. I really am. Because that's what's led me here. We can't see it in the moment. And there's this thing called the hindsight window. Someone describes it as the hindsight gap. If you can close that gap as small as possible. So something bad happens, and 3 days later, 3 weeks later, 3 years later, however long it takes for you to look back and laugh at that thing, or to smile, or to say, I'm actually grateful that quote unquote bad thing happened. If you can make that so short that actually in the moment you're saying, I don't know why this has happened, but I'm gonna be grateful for it anyway because it's making me stronger. You don't have to deal with that real negative. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel grief, you shouldn't feel sadness. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
But even those things we can be grateful for, because they're a sign that we had something good, and we have those great memories of that thing, even though it's maybe no longer here. It's a sign that we had something that made us happy.
Yes. Yeah, that's beautiful. And thank you for sharing openly about your personal experience. So you said a quote actually led to thinking or moving you in the other direction. I'm really curious. What was the quote?
So I was on a walk. I remember it so clearly. I was on a walk. It was during COVID, and I was listening to a podcast by a man named Vex King. A lot of people have maybe read or heard of the book Good Vibes, Good Life. And the quote that I heard on this podcast, he just sort of said it quite freely, but it really stuck. Was let me just recall the correct wording. Nothing is negative or positive until you label it as so. And I realized I've been labeling something as negative when actually it was always neutral until I decided what to label it as, until I stuck that label on it and told myself it was bad or good.
Yeah.
Nothing is negative or positive until you label it so.
Yeah, that's such a good one. Nothing is ever good or bad until you label it. Did I?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And so that has now become one of the most core things that you hold dear to yourself and really believe in and coach people to break cycles and jump out of. That is how impactful it was, not only just to you, but it almost has become your mission to help
Absolutely.
others on the same path. And what you said about closing that gap is so good. I never thought of it like that, but I think I've always said things that we need to be grateful for, even the bad things, and all of those other things, but like, to put it in perspective, I think the goal is to close that gap between an event happening and for us to realize that the event that happened wasn't bad, really, right? It was happening for a purpose. So I will like this reframing, I think I'm going to hold with me for the rest of my days, because it is
Well,
really good. So thank
Well,
you.
I can't take credit for it. I heard that many years ago by a man named Eric Edmeades. He talked about it. I think if you search on YouTube, you can maybe find it. But essentially, what led him to that realization was he was at the airport with his wife, and they had bags and clothes, and they each had their laptop, an Apple laptop, quite expensive. They had multiple cameras, all sorts in these bags, and the bags, they either got lost or they got stolen. And his wife was, quite full up of emotion, like, what do we do now? And he just thought, you know what, if in a couple of years we're going to laugh at this, why don't we do it now? And so they decided, like, yes, they were in a fortunate position to go and repurchase these things, but they had fun with it. They thought, maybe said, oh, well, that laptop needed changing anyway. And I get that's a fortunate position to be in, but it's an example of how we can pick, we can choose. Okay, how do I want to feel right now? Do I want to feel stressed? No. Do I want to feel angry? No. It's never the answer that you want to feel that way. Maybe sometimes anger is what you want to feel, but I want to feel calm and I want to feel content. Okay, well, what thought, what angle on this is going to help me to feel that way?
Yeah, that's beautiful. You know what this reminds me? Today's my daughter's birthday. Okay, she turns 12 today, and we've had this tradition, and we've taken it from a TV series called Gilmore Girls. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Love that.
Okay, so in that, the mother and daughter have a tradition that on Rory's birthday, the mother will go through her birth story with her every night. They have a tradition. So, I mean, I've been a big Gilmore Girl fan. And so for the past few years, since Sana's my daughter, since she's become a little more conversational, we've spent the previous night in bed, my husband, her, and I, and we've talked about her birth story. And every year we tell her the same stuff. It is beautiful to tell, because I feel like I get to relive one of the best days of my life again and again, and she enjoys it, and it's wonderful. But here's the thing: what actually struck me about what you just said is, now we laugh about it every year on the things that really stressed us out that night. Like, me and my husband were fighting because he went brought dinner for himself and I could not eat.
Understandable.
And I was really mad at him for many days after that. And now we're like really together laugh on it, right? I mean, we spent maybe, and this is a small example, and I know the following day there were other things that happened, and there was extended family involved during the birth process. It was stressful. It was stressful. And we lost few days or few hours even of really being in the moment with our newborn, and we were lost in all of the stress. Had I known that I should be closing this gap, because we're going to laugh about it, because we do laugh about it today, and we do take it lightly and have fun with it. It's no longer a stress moment, right? I wish, right? I think everybody has these kinds of moments in their life, but
yeah, and that's such a great example. And just to put in there, because I feel some people listening may be asking that question, is it's not that you just laugh about it in the moment and you allow people to do things that aren't kind. There is something to say about communication, but it starts with, okay, do I want to be angry at this person, or do I want to feel calm? Okay, if I want to feel calm, that's great, but I also, this is a value of mine, and they've kind of gone against something that's quite important to me. So if I want to feel calm, I'm going to feel calm, and I'm going to speak to them about this. I'm going to say, by the way, when you've just done that, that really hasn't made me feel great. And it's not just, okay, let's just ignore the thing that didn't make you didn't make you feel great or made you feel quite uncomfortable, whatever it is, try to get into that headspace where you can be calm enough to communicate, have a conversation. Because the thing is we forget that in those type of situations, your husband he just wasn't thinking, lots of emotions going around. And so were you, and which is, probably what led you down the route of anger. And so there's all these emotions going around. But if we can just pause, realize that nobody's out to get us. And if they are, it's because something's going on with them. Yeah. Nobody's purposefully out to get us for no reason. Even the people who've done the worst things in the world did it because they thought it was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
The worst criminals, they thought it was what was right. Yes. So it all starts with this conversation, right? If we can have a conversation, try and, okay, how do I want to feel? Have the conversation. It's not always easy, but it is easier in the long run.
Yeah, and it's important, right? Not all important things are easy, and we can do hard things. And I do think, like, there are some times when it is all in our head as well, and just clearing the air out helps a lot. And I've like a big advocate of conversation before conflict. Like, before you break a relationship, it's so easy, right? These people to be alone, to not have much to do. It's so easy. But to work through those things, to be able to communicate, to have curiosity, the empathy, not so easy. And like you said, you're right. Like, even the worst criminals don't do this out of just the need to do it, right? They do it because they feel like it's right in the moment. Yeah, that's amazing.
And that's an important thing to remember with things that people regret. I am somebody who used to have so many regrets that would eat me up inside. I couldn't look at, I had to scroll really fast through my camera roll to get past pictures of moments that I felt really bad about. But when you remember, hang on a minute, I was doing in that moment the best that I knew and what I thought was right with the information I had available to me. Even if you were drunk, because that's when most of our regrets happen, right? When you were drunk, it felt like the right thing to do. You can apologize for it, whatever it was that you did. You can think, hang on a minute, that was a bit silly. But in that, you wouldn't have done it. You wouldn't have done it if you didn't have a reason.
So what you're saying now is giving yourself the grace that even all the bad things and wrong things, and without labeling them bad, but whatever things that you have done that don't really sit with your values broadly, be graceful to yourself and give yourself the empathy and say that, hey, you only did it for these reasons, and it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, apologize if you need to. Do whatever you need to try and make it right. But be compassionate towards the version of you that wasn't in a great place. We've all been there. We've all been there in that not great place where we said something that was mean. That we've all got them, even if they were when we were 10 years old or just the other day. And the only way to embrace this more empowered version of ourselves is to forgive and to be compassionate towards that past version of us. Absolutely.
It is easier said than done, though. I mean, there is a lot of work required to actually get to the place. Because I can tell you now, there are so many things that I have said in the moment because I am a person who's expressive and sometimes can come off even as aggressive, right? So I quickly recognize it and I go back and change it. But I mean, there are so many things that I've said like 10 years back that if I could take back today, I would. And there are times I spend thinking about it. So it's not really easy to walk that back, especially knowing the impact that had on the people you love, like the people that you really care about. But all we can do is try.
Exactly. And that's why I'd say it comes down to three things: communicating as soon as you realize what's happened and trying to close that gap as much as possible. So I used to be somebody who would be in a bad mood and then I knew it was having an impact, but I maybe couldn't realize it or snap out of it or communicate what was happening with me in the moment. And I've been around people who do that and they never apologize for how they were. But over time and self-awareness, I've managed to decrease that. So within 10 minutes, I can realize, hang on a minute, I was a bit blunt. I'm just going to tell this person, sorry. It's usually my partner. Sorry. I knew I was a bit blunt. I think I'm just a bit stressed about something, but I apologize. closing that gap. Second thing, as we all know, it's so easy to say, but actually remember, you can't change the thing. You can't change it. You can't take it back. It's there. It's in the past. There's nothing you can do about it. So we go back to this idea of what's the point of reminding yourself of something and thinking about something in a way that makes you feel bad. It just makes you honestly, a worse version of yourself in the now. Because when we have these feelings of regret and self-frustration, we're not the best version of ourselves with other people. So we're then in a cycle, and then we do more things that we regret.
Yep.
Right. And then the third thing is just remembering that you did the best that you could in the moment. So you forgive the version of yourself in the moment. You connect with the present, realize, can't change it. I am where I am right now. Where do I want to be? And then in terms of future with the person that maybe you think you upset, that's the communication part.
That sounds very put together and well thought out and methodical, and just the things I need to keep things fixated in my mind, and use it every time I need it. So thank you for sharing your wisdom today.
No, you're very welcome.
Yeah. So just, to bring this all together, you do this great work. You have these strong life experiences. I can tell you're well read. You have been exposed and you're consuming things from the right kind of people, or who've done a lot of research around it and who have strong opinions around it. And so you've built yourself up to be able to then be the person. You were very nice in giving credit to all of the right people, but I think I'm going to take a moment to give you the credit of, even if those people did it, you're the one spreading their ideas. And so that counts just as much as coming up with a new idea, because how many new ideas are going to be there? It is a lot of the same, but really being able to, communicate them or put them out there and share and make them bigger than they are, is also a very important job that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Is there anything, I mean, you've given us a lot of wisdom, really, but is there anything, as you sort of we close down this conversation for today, feel that you can leave the listeners with, so that they feel inspired and like more in control and more empowered, to go do the things they want to do, and in the process just believe in themselves?
Yeah. So if you're anything like I was, the person listening, a few years ago, you'd read all of the quotes, you'd follow things that made you feel good on social media, you'd listen to the podcasts. But what I realized I was doing was I wasn't actually sort of listening to any of it. It would make me feel good in the moment, but I wasn't acting on it enough to sort of embed it in my brain. And it's only when you sort of embed it, truly understand it, and act upon these things that you hear, that you will then see the change in yourself and in your behavior and so forth. So, all the time, on a podcast, they'll ask, to a famous person, what's the one piece of advice you'd give, or what got you to the amazing place that you are now? And they'll give the answer. But we're wanting something more, rather than actually listening to what they say and acting upon that, because that is the answer. It's not a magic trick. It's listen to one person and implement what they say. Just try it. Don't read 10 books, read one book. Don't go from this podcast to, not to hype this one up, but don't go from this one to there's other podcasts. Listen to this one again. Listen to it a third time. Listen to it as many times as you need to understand the things that we've said. If regret is something that you struggle with, if negativity or lack of self-confidence is something you struggle with, then this is all you need to start to make that change. I can give you another quote, I can give you some more stuff, but there's no point if you don't act on it or truly understand it. So my advice for you to empower yourself is to start this from the beginning and listen again.
Wow, Izzie, that's really, really good. I think I'm going to be listening to this podcast many, many, many times until I do that. Love the bias for action. Love the fact that it only serves us if we act on it. And it's been powerful spending the last 30 minutes with you. And I'm really, really grateful for this time and for your wisdom. And I hope to, keep in touch and keep collaborating in different ways in the future. But you are inspiring, and I hope you so much luck. And I hope you reach 1 million people in the world or more, and really, really change lives, because I know you're going to.
Thank you so much. I'd honestly love to stay here for another half an hour, because it has been so wonderful. And I love you and your daughter's tradition. That's really, really lovely. And hopefully next year when you do it, you'll remember all these things that we talked about regret. And so thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Izzie.